Hi folks, HR Funk here, with a brand new video that I hope you enjoy. A few days ago, I was thinking back about the past 35 years that I've spent as a law enforcement officer, and it occurred to me that over the course of that 3.5 decades, at various times, I've carried 8 different pistols as an official sidearm. It also occurred to me that currently I either own that exact same pistol or another example of the exact same type of pistol that I carried at all those different times. And I thought it might be fun to go back and look at these different firearms and see if I could come up with my all-time favorite duty pistol. Now, I'm going to do this the way that I do my year-end wrap-up videos where I pick my favorite firearm that I've acquired during the year. And what that means is I start out with all of the pistols on the table, and I'll introduce them to you momentarily so you can see who the contestants are. And then one by one, I'll start to eliminate them, and I'll talk about them as I do so you know why I'm taking them out of the mix. And eventually, when there's only one firearm left on the table, that's going to be the one that I choose as my all-time favorite duty handgun. Now, a couple of things I want to mention here before I get started. As you'll notice, other than one pistol that I'm going to show you, and it's not going to come as any surprise, all of these are Smith & Wesson products. And there's a couple of reasons for that. First off, the very first department that I went to work for required officers to purchase their own firearm, and I told the story about the 5904 in the video for that as to how I came to acquire that particular pistol, and the one that followed it was also one that I purchased privately. When I transitioned to another department in 1991, that department at the time still allowed officers to carry personally purchased semi-autos, but very shortly thereafter went to an issued handgun for the entire department. That department eventually issued 2 successive handguns that I carried during the 23 years that I worked there. I now work for another department where we have the option of carrying a department purchased and issued firearm, or we can carry one that we purchase ourselves with the approval of the Chief of Police. So, what I'm going to do, as I said, is start to go through these, and if you want more information on any of these, most of them, if not all of them, have a video that I've recorded that I go into detail talking about them. So if you do a search with HR Funk and whatever specific firearm I'm talking about at the time that you want to know more about, you'll be able to find a video where I give a detailed explanation and review of that firearm. So I'm going to get started, and as I said, I'm going to introduce the contestants, and you can see which ones are in contention, and ultimately I'll choose my favorite duty pistol that I've carried over the course of the last 35 years. So without further ado, it's time to introduce the contestants. First up, as I introduce these, I'll talk about the years when I carried them just to give them a little bit of historical perspective. First up is my very first ever duty sidearm that I carried for law enforcement purposes, and that is the 1911 A1 government pistol. These were the pistols that I carried while I was a military policeman in the United States Marine Corps from 1985 until 1989, and then again when I was recalled for Operation Desert Storm in 1991 for a very brief period of time. I was back in for about 4 months, 4.5 months or thereabouts, and then back out again. But during that time, I was once again issued the 1911 A1 service pistol. So this was my first ever duty sidearm. Upon leaving the Marine Corps in 1989, I went to work for a small police department here in Ohio, and as I mentioned a moment ago, we had to purchase our own sidearms when we worked for that department. And at the time, in 1989, the transition in law enforcement from the traditional 6-shot revolver to the double-column 9mm service pistol was in full swing. And I was very much aware of that when I went shopping for my first ever duty pistol. And the one that I ended up selecting was the Smith & Wesson 5904. And again, there is a video where I detail the 5904. I carried this pistol from 1989. I carried it actually when I went through the police academy, which was from January of 1990 until April of 1990. And I carried it for about the first 6 months or so after I graduated the academy. But after that, I heard the siren song of the brand new, or the then brand new, 40 Smith & Wesson cartridge and Smith & Wesson's brand new Model 4006. Now the 4006 is the one pistol I don't currently own an example of. I foolishly traded my 4006 years ago on something else, and that is now on my to be reacquired list. But what I have with me is my model 1076, which is very similar to the 4006. The barrel on the 1076 is about 1/4 of an inch longer, and it weighs about 1/2 ounce more. And of course it has a single column magazine with a straight backstrap on the grip, as opposed to the double column magazine and the curved backstrap on the 4006. But mechanically and in terms of handling and feel, the 1076 is very similar to that 4006. So I'm going to be using it for a stand-in or a stunt double, if you will. And if I didn't say it before, I carried the 4006 from the fall of 1990 until December of 1991. In December of 1991, the police department that I had gone to that year transitioned to a department-issued pistol. And the first pistol that was issued was the double-action only Smith & Wesson Model 5943 9mm pistol. I carried this from December of 1991 until January of 2000, when we transitioned to another pistol. And this was the first polymer frame pistol that we transitioned to, or that I ever carried actually. This was also a Smith & Wesson product, and it's the Smith & Wesson Model 59, excuse me, the Smith & Wesson Model SW99, chambered for the 40 Smith & Wesson cartridge. So I had gone from the 9mm back to a 40 Smith & Wesson in 2000. The SW99 was our official service pistol until 2007, and it would probably have gone on in service quite a bit longer, but there was a Smith & Wesson representative that came to my department, and at that time the M&P pistols were brand new, and Smith & Wesson was really trying to get those out into the hands of law enforcement. And that representative made my department a very good deal on trading all of our SW99 pistols on brand new Smith & Wesson M&P pistols. So at that time we stayed with the 40 Smith & Wesson cartridge, but we transitioned to the M&P 40, and this is my 2007 era M&P 40. I carried this pistol from 2007, approximately June of 2007, until I retired from that department in June of 2014. Actually, I guess the official date was July of 2014. But this was my official pistol. I carried it all that time. And after leaving my previous department, I was reincarnated into a new position in a new department. And when I got there, since I had to leave this pistol, I had to leave when I left my old department. In fact, it wasn't until they traded these pistols a couple of years ago that I could finally buy this one back. And this is my pistol that I carried on duty there. But when I went to my new department, I needed a new pistol. And for a brief period of time, I had another M&P 40 that I carried. But back in 2017, I believe it was January of 2017, I purchased a new M&P 9 2.0. And I carried this for several years, and I really like the M&P 2.0 9mm. I'm going to talk about that a little bit more as we go. But this was my official duty pistol from January of 2017 up until, I believe, January of 2019. So I carried it for about 2 years. Then in January of 2019, for reasons that I explained in the past with regard to my eyesight, I wanted to transition to a pistol that allowed the use of a micro red dot pistol. This is my current duty pistol. It's a Smith & Wesson M&P 1.0. This is a Performance Center core pistol that was set up for optics use right from the factory. It also has a ported barrel, and it has the Performance Center tuned action. So those are the 8 contestants. And by the way, if you can't tell, I've been safety checking these as I go. This is about the second or third time that I've safety checked them to make sure none of them have any ammunition. But these are the 8 contestants, and I'm going to start to eliminate them one at a time. And as I do, I'm going to explain why I'm eliminating them. And if I didn't say this before, at the time that I carried each one of these, I felt they were very good pistols, very good duty pistols for that era. So it's probably not an entirely fair comparison that I am choosing one of these as my all-time favorite, because I'm actually comparing pistols from very different eras of law enforcement handguns. But at the same time, it's still going to be fun, so I'm going to start the selection process in just a moment. And here we go. Now, oddly enough, The first contender that I'm going to eliminate is the one that if I was choosing just my all-time favorite firearm, or all-time favorite handgun rather, from an emotional standpoint, this would certainly be number one. But when I'm looking at it through the prism of a duty handgun for law enforcement purposes, this one really loses a lot of ground to the other selections that I have on the table. And if you haven't figured it out already, that's going to be the 1911 A1 service pistol. Much as I love the 1911 platform and as much as I enjoy shooting it, this one, because of its limited capacity, and our 1911 A1s when I was in the Marine Corps still had the 7-shot magazines, so very limited capacity, particularly for the size and weight of this pistol. And for law enforcement applications, it's just not the best option that I have on the table. So unfortunately, the first one that's leaving the table is going to be the 1911 A1 service pistol. 1 down and 7 to go. The next one that I would eliminate is also going to be partly due to weight and partly due to the limited magazine capacity. And that's going to be my .40-06, as represented here by my 1076. During the time that I carried the .40-06, I liked it a lot, and the fact that it was 40 ounces unloaded and was a fairly heavy, bulky pistol didn't bother me because I believed that it was very well built, which it was. It was a very strong pistol, and I also thought that that weight that I was enduring while I was carrying it was more than made up for by the effectiveness of the 40 Smith & Wesson cartridge. Even so, when I look back about this now, the 11-shot magazine capacity of the .40-06 and that extremely heavy weight really makes it not ideal for law enforcement applications. For just taking to the range and shooting and having fun with, it was perfect for that. But day in, day out, carrying as a law enforcement duty weapon, it's just not the best option, especially when I compare it to everything else that I have on the table. So I like the .40-06 a lot when I carried it, but it's going to be number 2 that I eliminate from the table. The next one to go is going to be one of the pistols that I carried for the longest periods of time, and that's going to be my SW9940. Now, these pistols really, I felt, were very underrated back during the time that we carried them. And it strikes me as odd that the SW99 is essentially a clone of the Walther P99, and it also shares many of the design features with the Canic, and I'm sure I'm pronouncing that wrong, I believe it's actually pronounced Janic, pistols that are made currently that seem to be very popular, but back in the early 2000s when the SW99 was being manufactured, it really was not widely popular. And it's a pretty good pistol. It made the change for me when I had been carrying the 5943 double action only for many years prior to that. We went back to having the ability to make a precise single action shot, which I appreciated. And as much as I like the 5943 and as nice as that double action only trigger is, it still wasn't the same as having a true single action trigger pull, which again we had with the SW99. These things I can still to this day shoot very well and very fast, and it's because of that trigger system and also because the pistol fits my hand very well. But here again, it just has a limited magazine capacity compared to the other options that I have on the table. These were 12-shot magazines, so I did pick up 1 round over the capacity that I had with my .40-06. But again, in terms of the limited capacity, and also in terms of just being somewhat bulky, if you look at this and compare it to some of the other options that I have here, it is a little bulky, a little bit clunky. And it also, I found over the years, was somewhat fragile in terms of the rear sight. We had more than one of these where the rear sight received a sharp blow and it broke the small piece of metal that holds it in place, and the sight would essentially fall out of the pistol. So that was one of the few weak points of these, and for those various reasons I'm going to eliminate the SW99, but again, it did have some very desirable characteristics and I still shoot this thing pretty well. Down to 5 contenders that are left, and of these I've got 3 9mm and 2 40 Smith & Wessons. And this is where it starts to get very difficult, because all of the firearms that I have on the table currently are ones that I like quite a bit for different reasons. So starting to eliminate them at this point is going to be very difficult. And as I look at the contenders that I have left, I'm not sure which one I'm going to pick next. I guess the one that I'll pick next, and this is difficult, is going to be my 5904. And I like this pistol. It shoots well, it's extremely reliable, it's very lightweight because of its alloy frame, it points well, it fits my hand well, but it does have a traditional trigger, or traditional double action trigger I should say. So the first trigger pull is double action, and after that each successive pull is single action. So the shooter does have to master 2 different trigger pulls. Now that's not insurmountable, and it's also something, it was another characteristic of the SW99 pistol. We had that same dynamic with that trigger. But because of that, and because the others are simpler to operate, particularly under stress, where you don't have to concern yourself about 2 different trigger pulls, I think that's the main reason that I'm going to eliminate this one at this point. But here again, I really like this pistol, and it's almost painful to take it off the table. But this is going to join the other ones back behind me, and then I'm going to be down to 4 contenders left. Although you couldn't tell, I actually had to leave the camera off for quite a while after that last selection to try to figure out which one of these I'm going to eliminate next. And it was a very difficult choice, and I'm getting down to the point where it seems like the criteria that I'm using to select the next pistol to remove from the table are becoming more and more thin. And I think the next one I'm going to remove, if I were choosing one all-around pistol for on-duty, off-duty, plainclothes carry, etc., the one that would do it all very well, it would be the one that I'm going to eliminate next. But since we're talking about duty pistols that we're carrying in a duty holster, the next one that I'm going to eliminate is going to be my double action only 5943. The only reason that I'm eliminating it at this point is because it doesn't have quite the sight radius that some of the pistols left here still have. And again, since this is a duty pistol, we don't have to be quite so concerned with using the most compact or the shortest barrel and slide option that we have available. And also, because this is just a blued steel slide on the 5943, it could potentially rust, which the options that are remaining on the table are less likely to rust because they have stainless steel construction of their slides and barrels, along with the newer coatings to help make them more rust and corrosion resistant. And since it's a 9mm, it has a 15-shot magazine as opposed to the 17-shot magazine that I've got with the one remaining 9mm. And basically, due to all of that, as well as the double action only trigger, now I like this trigger, but if I'm being brutally honest, it's not quite as good a trigger pull quality as the M&Ps that I have on the table still. So unfortunately, again, as much as I like the 5943, it's going to be the next one that gets removed from the table. And I've got 3 contestants remaining on the table. And the next one that I'm going to remove is the one firearm remaining on the table that I carried for the longest period of time. That's going to be my 2007 era M&P 40, and this was and is a great pistol. And one of the things I noticed about these early M&Ps is they had a much better quality trigger pull than some of the M&Ps that came later on. This one still has a great trigger pull. In fact, the Performance Center enhanced action on my current duty pistol is only slightly better in terms of trigger quality than this M&P 40 that I carried for all those years. Now, part of that is because this has had many rounds cycled through it, and I'm sure that's helped improve the trigger. But even so, I remember right out of the box, this had a very good trigger. The only reason I'm removing it at this point is because it doesn't have the capacity of the 9mm 2.0 M&P that's left on the table. And also, it doesn't allow the sighting option of my current duty pistol that uses the micro red dot. So because of those two criteria, I think these two pistols that are remaining are still superior to this one, even though this was a faithful companion for all those years from 2007 up to 2014. It's the one that I'm going to be removing next, and that's going to leave me with my final two contestants on the table. Last two, folks. I've got my current duty pistol and the one that was its immediate predecessor. This one, again, is my M&P 9 2.0 that I acquired back in 2017, and my M&P Performance Center Core 40 that I acquired in the early winter of 2019. So I'm going to have to choose between these two, and I'll talk about their attributes a little bit first before I come up with a true winner. The M&P 2.0 was and is a great pistol. With the 2.0 upgrades, I think it helped to elevate the M&P platform a little bit, although not tremendously so. And I have people ask me from time to time when they still view the video that I made when I reviewed this pistol, if it's worth changing from the 1.0 or the original M&P to one of the 2.0s. And I always say, if they like the 1.0 and it's functioning well for them and they shoot it well, unless they just want to have the newest iteration of the M&P pistol, I don't think there's enough there to justify spending the money to transition to the 2.0. But the 2.0, if you're just setting out to buy one, does have a couple of upgrades that I think help it out some over the original version of the M&P. The 9mm version has a 17-shot magazine, so you have a good high magazine capacity with one in the chamber. That gives you 18 rounds of ammunition going on duty. And that's to the point where the idea of having to reload would require a tremendous firefight in order to go through 18 rounds of ammunition, have to transition magazines, and still have to continue firing. Not that those scenarios haven't happened in the history of law enforcement, but they are extremely rare. So the idea of having to reload with your 17-shot magazine is really not all that likely. The idea of being involved in a firearms incident or an officer-involved shooting incident is relatively rare in law enforcement to begin with, and then having to reload during that incident and still have to keep firing is even that much more remote. But the 2.0 M&P 9mm does have a lot going for it. That said, taking a look at my M&P 40 Core pistol, it has, as I said before, the Performance Center enhancements. It's an accurate pistol. It has a very good action, and the action is actually noticeably better than the action on the 2.0 M&P. And as I said, really the only pistol that I had on the table, at least of the M&Ps that I had on the table, that had an action that comes close to this particular Performance Center pistol was my older 2007 M&P 40. And again, that had and has a very good trigger pull on it. I wish I could hand these to you so you could feel them and actually be able to tell that for yourself. But this pistol does allow the use of the micro red dot, and that's one of the things that and that's really the primary reason that I have this pistol. If my 2.0 9mm had allowed me to install the micro red dot optic, I would still be carrying this pistol. There's not a doubt in my mind. But since it didn't, I went shopping for something that would allow that, and I ended up making the transition to this pistol and back to the 40 Smith & Wesson cartridge, which really didn't bother me because I don't mind the 40 Smith & Wesson cartridge. I think it's effective. You give up a couple of rounds to the 9mm and you put up with a little bit more recoil impulse, but all in all, at the end of the day, the 40 Smith & Wesson makes a fine duty cartridge. So of these two, which one am I going to pick as my all-time favorite duty sidearm? The first thing I have to do is figure out how I'm going to decide that. I think based solely on the ability to continue using the pistol as my eyes have aged, I'm going to opt for my current duty pistol, the M&P 40 Core. And when we look at the progression of a law enforcement officer's career and the changes physically that take place to your body over the years, the ability to have a firearm that you can continue using even when your eyesight starts to decline a little bit is extremely important. With the M&P 2.0 9mm, And if you notice in my qualification course videos, most of the time nowadays I'm wearing my reading glasses when I'm shooting any of the firearms that I'm using out there, because it helps to sharpen those sights just enough to allow me to shoot a little bit better than if I'm trying to shoot without those reading glasses. With my M&P 40 core pistol and the Loophole Delta Point Pro installed, I don't have to worry about those reading glasses. When I come up with the pistol, the Delta reticle is very clear, it's very well focused in my eyes, and I can place a very precise shot if I need to, or I can place very fast shots on target if I need to, depending on the situation. And I really think, at least as I look at things nowadays, this is my all-time favorite duty pistol. But even with that said, all of the pistols that I've been talking about since I started the video have a lot of very positive attributes. I still really enjoy all of them, and I wish my eyesight was what it once was, so I didn't have to worry about reading glasses. And if I didn't have that, if I still had my 20-something-year-old eyesight, I'm fairly certain the 2.0 9mm M&P would be the one that I would have chosen for my all-time favorite duty pistol. But I don't, so the M&P 40 core wins. And that's the video for today. I hope you enjoyed it. If you have any questions or comments, as always, make sure you forward those to me. Remember, if you order anything from Optics Planet, be sure to use my discount code, which is... And if you use that discount code, it's good for 5% off anything you purchase from Optics Planet. See you next time, folks. And until then, good shooting. Bye-bye.